Talk about the stretch run for the Pacers. What is important for them statistically? What do they need to show in this final month and a half? Plus, why is Tyrese Haliburton playing better? Should Jarace Walker be playing more often? And some seeding considerations with Dave Searle on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats, you made it through the week, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team 4-4s, and today, much to get into with Dave Searle, the podfather of Miller Time Podcast. Wide-ranging conversation. I've been dying to have him on and a guest on for a while. We get into a lot. The stretch run coming for the Pacers. What do they need to still show to give everybody confidence that they can be really good in the postseason? What do they need to think about with their seeding when it comes to the Celtics, the Cavs, home court advantage, and all sorts of things like that? Plus, why is Tyrese Haliburton playing better right now? Jarace Walker's current sitting situation, is that right at all? Do they need to change anything about it? And so much more little goofy stuff that you get when Dave and I get together. Awesome conversation. One of my favorite podcasts done in a while. I hope you guys love it too. Let's just jump right in. Dave Searle. It's about to be March. It's officially the stretch run, as they say, of the NBA season, and the Pacers are trying to cement their seed, to play good basketball, to get where they want to go this year. And I finally got off my booty and got a guest to talk about this basketball team with me instead of just talking to myself for 2 straight weeks. You know him as the Podfather, itching in the pursuit of an NBA championship. Dave, how are you? Are you going to beat the Knicks instead of losing after quitting podcasting like Paul George?
I'm doing very well. Speaking of getting off your booty, I never felt more 40 years old than I did just a few minutes ago when you texted me to say that the pod's about to start, and I was asleep on my couch with my phone just laying on my chest. I've just been kind of waiting for it to start, and I dozed off. So yeah,
it's the dream.
What it is, it's because doing this podcast has actually been getting in the way of me being physically ready to do great podcasting. So I need to step away for a little bit. How does he keep doing this, Tony?
I messaged
How does he
somebody
not know
about
that things are coming out of his mouth?
I know. Like that, he said that, right? And in his head, that quote sounds awesome, right? Okay, I'm going to focus on the Sixers and all the fans are going to love it. But the implication is you previously doing the podcast was actually taking away from your basketball responsibilities for a long time. You've been doing this for seasons on seasons. Like the Clippers got to be cracking up seeing this, right?
You know, there's a quote from Stephen Holder who was talking about Anthony Richardson, and there's all this stuff going on with the Colts about them. You know, the Colts aren't like giving him the job. There's going to be maybe a quarterback competition, and you know maybe they're not fully behind him, and they benched him, and all this sort of stuff, right? And so there is concern that it might affect Anthony Richardson. He might not take it very well. Blah 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 blah. Well, according to Stephen Holder, he's saying that he has an agent that is saying, "Look, you're not getting it done. Like it's year 3. You haven't gotten it like one way or another. They just need somebody who can play, and you haven't shown that yet. And there's all you can do is go out and be awesome. That's how just tell them the truth and get them to understand like the real situation, what's going on." And I'm glad that he has that. That makes me a little bit more confident in Anthony Richardson. But like, it made me also really think of. I feel like there's 2 guys. Paul George and Oladipo were kind of 2 of them where like they both sort of need a guy like that on their team. That's like, you gotta how can he still be in the headspace where he would think that this is a good idea? I mean, it is just so hard to understand. I've always felt really sorry for Oladipo for betting on himself in a way. I've admired it. That he should have signed that contract. It's crazy that he did, but he needed someone to shake him and be like, I know you want a max contract so bad, but you gotta sign this, man. He is about to turn to dust. It's $80 million. Just sign it. You can always get another one. you need people like that in your life. That's the whole point of having the team behind you, right? So presumably Paul George is paying a percentage of his paycheck to somebody, managers, PR people, agents. I bet they're all drawing a paycheck, and not one of them in his, how long has he been in the NBA now? Not one of them in this decade plus career has gotten through to him and said, like, you just, Paul, come back to earth, man. I mean, I just want to shake him. Tony, I just want to shake him. It's fascinating to me that he would still be capable of saying something like that.
It's brutal. Did you see that podcast Vic did a few months ago where someone was like, is it true the Pacers offered you a 4-year, $120 million extension and you turned it down? I'm like, that's not even legally possible for them to have offered him. How did this rumor get to this point?
Right.
And then he said they only offered me whatever he said. And then he said they only offered me for whatever it was. And I was like, that was the max they could offer you at the time. Like, what is this, some insulting conversation? It drove me crazy. But I do appreciate Paul's comments this week, because now I can make that joke forever. That the only thing keeping me out of the NBA is this job right here. Me being tethered to my desk doing this podcast is why I'm not currently signing a 10-day for the Pacers 15th roster spot. They play tonight against the Miami Heat. If they win, they'll stay in 4th. They'll clinch the tiebreaker over the Heat. It is an important game. The stretch run's interesting. Last year, they showed some progress defensively in the last month or so of the season. And March basketball can be a little fluky, but that did carry into good enough defense in the playoffs. What are you kind of looking for in this? They have a little over a month, about a month and 2 weeks left of the season. What do you want to see from them now that would really make you feel good about what they've shown this season that makes them feel forceful or fierceful or whatever starting term you want to use come playoff time?
Well, I think we talked about this the last time. We did a podcast about this time last year heading into the playoffs. It was sort of a similar question. And it's like, I mean, everybody's looking for consistency. You want to have a little bit more of that. I mean, a team that shoots a decent amount of threes is going to have a little bit more variance, but it just still doesn't feel like they always keep the foot on the gas when they have an advantage. And then when they're playing some lesser teams, they can play down to that competition. It continues to haunt them. And moments like that happen in playoff games where, if you have a good lead, I mean, you saw them come back from ahead a couple times in the playoffs last year, building up a big lead and either losing the games or coming very close to doing so. You just can't get away with it in the playoffs. And then when you play some of the higher level teams that they're inevitably going to face in the playoffs, they're just not going to get enough breaks. If they just can't keep full gas on, they won't win any game that they can't go full gas on. And, they haven't shown enough of an ability to really do that. And so it seems few and far between that they really have a wire to wire. They're always on, they're always in control of victories. And so love to just see that continue to develop. Part of it's just being young. I mean, it took the Warriors a while to figure this out. It took the Celtics a while to figure this out. And we don't know yet if the Pacers can reach those kind of heights, but they're still a little bit younger, and this is part of the learning experience. But anyway, if they're going to take on some of the better teams in the East, Cleveland is playing excellent basketball, and the Celtics are playing excellent basketball. If they want to have any chance to beat teams like that, then they're just going to have to get a little bit more consistent. And then, of course, we want to see, Nesmith, I think, play better. We're starting to see that and come in, and, he is a valuable part of the rotation, and they're going to need to go deep enough to be able to compete against some of those higher level teams, have guys with his particular skill set. Love to see him a little bit more out of him.
They have so much depth that they can kind of ride the wave of all their individual players and consistency and still win this year, right? But, I mean, the first time they had a game the whole season to me where it was a wire-to-wire dominant butt kicking was mid-November when they beat the Pelicans, right? It is – they are a good team, clearly, but you're right. They very rarely have 48 just oh, yeah, there they go, perfect play kind of stuff. And that is something I'm looking for. All season, I've talked about Pascal being their most consistent contributor, and even he right now is having his first down stretch. They don't really have games where you feel like the whole starting five and the whole bench, firepower, boom, boom, they've got it down all night. Here come the bench, how often do they get like a full fourth quarter of garbage time, right? And it's very rarely because they were the team far ahead. It's a very like niche critique. They're the fourth seed in the East. Like they're good.
Right.
But you're right that they don't have that kind of gear. And I think that would be something good for them to show. Like they just played Toronto and were like losing in the second quarter and almost gave up their lead in the fourth. Like they do need to find that kind of thing where they can show that even against bad teams, nonetheless against someone good. And yes, consistency is going to be tough for a young team. And I do get that a consequence of having, like I mentioned at the beginning of my ramble here, a lot of depth is that you're going to be riding the wave of 10 guys, not, 7 or 8. And so it's more likely to have that volatility of one guy being down or another guy being up. But yeah, it has been a rare thing for them that would be sharp for them to show, because in the playoffs last year, they would beat the Knicks and then lose to the Knicks by 25 in game 5. They lost terribly to the Bucks in game 5 and game 1. Like they were just not all over the place, but just lacking that sharp consistency that has kind of eluded them. And I agree that is something I would be looking for in the final stretch is, can they find that? And every young team is looking for it. It's a sign of maturity to get it. It's a sign of being elite to get it. And that's kind of next for them. Everyone, quick little break so we can talk about FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Many love using FanDuel's live betting features. It keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether they're backing their team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. They never feel like they missed their chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if they win their first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. On the defensive end, Dave, do you like they're 15th now? They're above average. Do you actually believe that? That's something I mentioned earlier this week is something I'm keeping an eye on the rest of the way. Is they stunk on defense to start the season. They were really good in January. What do you believe they are defensively, and how much of that are you personally going to find out kind of the rest of the way?
Man, that's very interesting because it seemed like for a long time that they've had the personnel to be better. And I think that one of the keys to them really kind of taking another step is just Nembhard taking it kind of to another level. It's just really shutting down people. That's obviously a crucial piece that they need to be able to truly be a good defense. He's always been a good defender, but he's really being disruptive to other players' stars. And that's a huge deal. And so I'd like to see that, continue to have an impact and a ripple effect on, the Pacers' ability to defend better teams, because that's really the key. I mean, they've long had issues where one particular star on the other side just would go nuts, and then that just ends up bleeding into a ripple effect on the entire defense. It doesn't matter how good any individual piece is. There's just too much of a leak, and they're scrambling the entire game. They can't do anything. And so being able to really kind of put a plug into that, I think can continue to – that's the kind of thing that you build on as a defense. And, when you have an ability to put him on someone and then have Myles Turner hopefully, have good games inside, then you can start to have building blocks of a better defense. So, I mean, it still continues to be a work in progress for the team, but – you just really see them clicking, attacking better, being more cohesive as a unit, being able to call out coverages better, and just being just quicker of their rotations. You've really kind of seen stretches where they've played defense that seem pretty impressive. So, it seems like they are at a level where they should be able to reach that in the defense, in the playoffs. When it really matters and they have to play a little bit harder, everybody always does in the playoffs. It seems like something that could translate, because a lot of what they were doing beyond, Nembhard's individual excellence was just communication and, just being quicker to rotations. And so that's something that should translate into the playoffs. So, I would buy the idea that their defense is going to be better in the playoffs than maybe their overall average has been. Maybe not an elite unit, not, they still have, I think, a ways to go for that. But, I think that the defense, I would, if it was the team that you're going to see in the playoffs, is it going to be a little bit above average or a little bit below average? I'd say above average. I think that that kind of success will translate long term for the Pacers.
Yeah, I don't know yet. What's funny is when I asked Tyrese this, so they played Charlotte in December, considered by everyone their worst loss of the season, right? Not even close. And then they started playing awesome. And they're playing really good defense in like early January, late December. I can't remember exactly when I asked them this, but they were playing good at the time. They're back to 500, and their defense was awesome for like a good stretch. And I asked Ty, Ty, do you think this is the best defense you guys have played since you got here? And his first response was like, well, maybe the playoffs last year. I was like, oh, I have like quite literally never had that thought cross my mind that like they think the way they defended the playoffs last year was like the best they've defended, and maybe that's true. I don't think they were bad. They won 2 series and like gave Boston enough fits, but I never was like, wow, it's so good. So, but I did take that to mean to think, one, they thought they defended well and they did do better than I think many expected. And 2, to your point, when the chips were down, they did play connected, lock into a game plan, hit a level that was good enough to match their offense last year and win. And now their offense is a little worse, but their defense is much better. So on one hand, I can say, well, they're 15th now. If they up their level again, you're right. They could be an above average-ish or close to average defense in a postseason setting. On the other hand, there's still half of this current season where they were like just god-awful on the end of the floor. And last year they stunk on defense until basically the All-Star break. Like I'm having trouble, like where should the starting point be? Right. And like they still have games where they just played Denver. They're losing cutters all night. Christian Brown's kicking their butt under the basket. And like, yeah, it's Jokic. I'm not like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. They have to fix everything. But they still have nights where it's not great. So I would, if they have another month, if March they finish top 10 in defense again, I might be seriously considering like a favorite that they would be, an average or better defensive team among all the playoff teams. But I still need to see a little bit more myself just because their variance is so high on that end. Albeit, I agree with you. It always felt like they had good enough individuals to be better than just like, why is this team so bad on that end? So I don't know where you land on that, but I think I would like to see a little bit more sustained good play on that end of the floor.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, one thing when it's maybe someone lights a fire into them is a point of emphasis, and it's kind of exciting when they do it. But, that kind of, because I mean, a lot of what they're doing is it's effort based. They're it's not necessarily that they suddenly grew a couple of inches in wingspan and have started being elite at navigating screens or something. Like it's just they're just communicating better and they're closing out harder. I mean, like there's a lot of what they're doing, and they're putting more pressure on opposing offenses. And I mean, that's just it's going to wear on you over time. And so, can they sustain that all the way through the end of the regular season? And then B, can they turn it on in the playoffs and keep it on during the playoffs? But it's sort of if you had to make a bet towards how good are they going to be towards the end of April and as the regular season winds down, that gets a little shaky because it's effort based. But then in the playoffs, that's good because you can rely on it because the energy of the playoffs and the home crowd and all the cameras being on, even how important each game is, can help lift off up that effort. Every team plays harder defense in the playoffs, and there's I think reason to believe that they might turn it down a little bit as the season grinds to an end and then flip it back on for the playoffs. That would be my general prediction of how that would go.
Another thing I'll be looking at for the stretch run, the standings. Duh, everybody is. They're getting pretty close. In fact, if they beat Miami tonight, they'll be looking really good for top 6. No doubt. Don't have to think about it too much. It'd be like 6 or 7 games ahead of 7th. Still got to try for a couple more weeks, but getting close to feeling very good about making the playoffs. How do you feel about the quality of the East this year in terms of a couple things. One, I mean, I think this part's obvious, but like the Celtics, would you want to avoid their side of the bracket? And if so, how would you kind of prioritize? Because it seems so obvious right now to me that being in the 4-5 would be awesome for the Pacers, right? They could play a Central Division team that either is one they're 3-1 against this year in Detroit, or one they beat in the playoffs last year in Milwaukee. It could have home court, and it could potentially avoid the Celtics side of the bracket. That sounds awesome. Am I oversimplifying that? Are you less scared of Boston this year, or is it really that important to you that they can stay there?
Well, I mean, it gets tough because we still really haven't seen Cleveland have that postseason success, and then the Celtics are clearly an elite team and a veteran team who, we talked about the Pacers trying to go through take their lumps in the playoffs and be able to build up that long-term consistency that a veteran team would have. They are that team that has it. And so that makes it very difficult to be the team that you are trying to overcome. And it just might also overall be more talented too. I mean, so they have every piece that makes you concerned in the playoffs. So, I mean, I would still consider to be the Celtics to be the best team in the East and the biggest threat in the playoffs by a tier. So, of course, that you'd want to avoid the Celtics if possible. But I also think that, you're going to end up going against, them or the Cavaliers, so and even though they are a young team and they don't quite have that experience, they've clearly shown through the dominant regular season that they have, and how good they've been on both sides of the ball, that they are a force to be reckoned with as well. And they get pretty close to where the Celtics are at. So if you have to prefer one versus the other, then I think that you'd rather go up against Cleveland, but it's two very tough things. So I think you got an enormous challenge in front of you either way. So I think that you think about the rest of the bracket, like what is that first round matchup going to be like, and what's going to give you the best position to get into that next round in the first place. That is where a lot of my focus would be, and then just kind of let the chips fall where they may. I think that what's much more important about what side of the bracket they're on is home court advantage is huge for them, because they're just completely different at home than they are on the road. And it is crucial for them to be able to get that home court advantage. And so that would be a much bigger point of my focus than necessarily, how to set up the rest of their playoffs correctly. As long as they get home court, I'm good. I know, and nobody else in the East really scares me enough to really think about shuffling around.
They made the conference finals last year and they won 2 road playoff games. Right? Like home is really important. And yes, game 2 in Milwaukee, game 7 in New York, like massive wins. Like they won those series, but they were awesome at home until Boston. Right. And I agree with you that I think even if it is like 3 or 4, or you're playing Boston in the second round, like if they're home in the first round, that should be the goal. And if that's what it comes down to late for whatever reason, the Cavs catch, or the Celtics catch the Cavs, or they're catching Knicks, or whatever the situation is, that should still be the top priority. I think almost everybody would agree, because of the Celtics playoff pedigree, the dreamiest result would be hosting the 4-5 or whatever, and then playing the Cavs in the second round, maybe hosting the 3-6, whatever. But I agree with you that if somehow it comes down to they have to decide between picking the side of the bracket of Cavs Celtics or hosting, they should want to host the first round and win a series again. The proof of concept of winning a series 2 years in a row about how good you are and how good you can be is so important, right? Like if you lose in the first round this year, you have to question 2 years ago and figure out where you are and what your direction is, versus it's just way more important to me. And I think people have gotten and I asked you the question under the framing of the Boston Celtics, obviously, but I think people have gotten ahead of themselves with that being the lead thing to decide, right? They still should be pushing so hard to be 3 or 4 or whatever they can end up as. I don't think they can get higher than 3. I think 3 is probably pretty hard already, but I agree with you on that. Tyrese Haliburton's playing great, Dave. Probably his best 4-game stretch of the season. What are you seeing? Why do you think he's looking better?
Well, I mean, for one thing, again, it's kind of the same point. He's a whole different player at home than on the road right now. I mean, and to a degree that is kind of insane. It's like there's always going to be some splits in certain situations. But his
Doug McDermott, baby, the GOAT of road games.
I mean, he was even a little bit better on the road last year than this year, but I know there's been maybe some speculation about injuries or maybe like his back and certain travel accommodations aren't super great and all that sort of jazz. Whatever the case is, I mean, he's like a whole different human being when he gets back on the road. I mean, gets back at home. What is it? His true shooting percentage at home is 0.65, which is like all-time Steph Curry kind of stuff from a guard. And then on the road, it's like 0.567, which is kind of, I mean, he scores a lot of points, but is it really doing that much for the offense? It's a polar opposite sort of look. And, his obviously much 20 points versus less than 17 on the road. Assists are down. I mean, every stat category is down, and to a degree that you don't normally see in a player. Yep. And so it was happening a little bit early on, but it seems to continue happening. And part of the reason why the Pacers seem to be playing well and turn on a little bit is they're finally getting some freaking home games. Like the schedule is so comically slanted towards the road. They don't even pull up 50-50 on road and home games until game 79. They are road heavy at every single point. Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like this is a completely underrated story. And I don't hear enough people really talk about this with the Pacers, but what's that?
I didn't even know that.
Oh dude, no.
This is the first time I've heard that.
I should pull up the tweet that I did on it. Now Elon throttled me, so I know that you didn't see the. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm sure that's happening to a degree, but not to me. But I'm getting throttled.
Continue, Grimes. Continue.
I'm getting throttled by myself from barely tweeting about the Pacers anymore. But no, I mean, it's a stark difference. They're down a deficit of like 7-8 games of road versus home for many chunks of the season. And again, they never have even 50-50 road and home games. The first time that happens is game 79. They go up one in game, no, I'm sorry, I guess it's game 80, because of course it's 80, 81, 82. So it's 50 at 80, 50. They go up one in game 82, and then they finally settle back down, of course, at 50-50 at game 52, like everybody else. However, 2 of their games are in France. So even though that's true, it technically never really happens.
Really?
Because one of their home games was in Paris. I'll see if I can dig that up. But I mean, for many splits in the season, they're down 6, 7, 8 games more on the road than at home. And so, that's kind of, I always figured the season would be something like this, where it's a little slow at first, took a while to catch up, and then now they're starting to they have another road run, and then they finally even it up as you get up into April. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why they're playing better is because Tyrese Haliburton didn't make the All-Star team, got some rest, and now they're playing a bunch of games at home. I really think that's a huge factor as to why he's playing so much better. And so I think that's going to continue to play out. I don't know if a whole off season of real rest is going to kind of like square everything up and give them a new fresh start. I'm going into the next season, but I think that's a huge part of it. Now, it's also been pointed out many times that he has not been very aggressive, especially early on in games. He seems hesitant to take shots, and he seems to be making a point to let's press it a couple times early on in the game and try to get, because you can't be a good distributor unless you are a genuine threat with the ball. And I think that in general, times where I've said, why isn't he shooting the ball? I mean, it still happens, but it's happening less. And he seems to be making it a specific point to try to fire away a little bit earlier in the game to kind of balance out Defenses maybe kind of ignoring him a little bit early on. And of course, that's going to lead to a lot more assists when he gets a little bit more defensive pressure because he's being more aggressive. Now he gets the opportunity to pass the ball a lot more, and he saw the potential assists that he had in against the Nuggets, more than Jokic, but no one's counting.
Quite a few more than Jokic, actually.
Quite a few more than Jokic.
Yeah.
It's and there's something of an argument to be made that maybe some of the reasons why he had so many open threes to pass to is because he probably could have called his number a couple extra times in that Nuggets game, which just always seems to be true with Haliburton and something that he still needs to be working on. That's another thing I'd like to see down the stretch. Finish a couple more plays at the rim. Just try it. Just try it because it's important. I think that the home cooking is a huge part of it, and a little bit more aggression is helping too. But I think that, hey, if my back is killing me and really affecting me, and I've gotten a lot of rest and I'm at home a lot, I'd probably be a little bit more aggressive too. So I think that's probably a little bit hand in hand there.
Yeah, take some floaters, man. It's like the signature shot of his whole career. It's like part of what made him better last year.
Yeah.
He's throwing out of those a lot.
Why isn't he shooting floaters anymore?
That's the one that I think that most people can tell he's taking. It feels like he's taking.
Yeah.
To me, he's just getting off the ball one dribble sooner at times.
Yeah.
And he's not on this homestand. He's just, I'm going to take a million threes.
Yeah.
And he has wiggle. Like, it's Siakam Pirtle who's slow, but like, when's the last time he just totally cooked someone like several times in a game, right? The way he did.
Right.
Yeah, Wednesday. Like he got Pirtle bad a few times on a switch. And I was like, oh wow. Like he hasn't, it's Siakam Pirtle. I understand that it isn't like some elite perimeter defender who's fast, but that was a thing. And
I would love to see a local like mattress company make Tyrese Haliburton a spokesperson. Like, you can hear my stats on home and at the road. Think the Long's mattress. When I get home to my Long's custom fit bed, I get a good night's sleep, and all of a sudden I'm putting Pirtle on skates. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, you think Jakob Pirtle's agreeing to that ad? I don't think he's probably
sure.
He's probably up there. Yeah,
he's probably got a good sense of humor.
Yeah,
it's like, I got one too.
8% better true shooting on very similar usage. Almost 8% better from three, 6% better in general. 3.5 more points, 2.2 more rebounds, 1.1 more assists at home for Tyrese Haliburton this season. I had no idea about this home road thing. I'm going to investigate this pretty much the second this podcast ends. I assumed it would like balance out right now. They have 4 at home right now. And then in mid-March, they have a 5-game homestand. But in between, 7 of 10 on the road. So it just never happens, right? And that's for a team that's been better at home, that's a big deal. And for Haliburton, it's funny, like, I can't remember when he said this. It was a while ago, but at one point he told me, and other reporters obviously, that he likes road games better because like sometimes there's fans who heckle him and it gets him into the game. And
right.
I think all things considered with his health, if it's even, that's the case for him. But clearly this year there's something about the home games, and that makes it even more valuable to get that home court advantage that we talked about. I really want to dig into this. This is fascinating. Last question. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, his past career splits bear that out, where he plays a little bit better on the road. So that would be interesting to see with more rest, maybe, if that's truly the case.
Yeah, last year 2% better true shooting on the road. That's so close though. That's like, it's the sample size of a 41-game season. Okay, I don't want to overdo this, but I want to talk about it because other people are talking about it. The Raptors-Pacers played last night. T.J. McConnell was out. Injured Nembhard got in foul trouble. Late third quarter, early fourth quarter. Pacers are up double digits. They need a 10th guy. And they did not turn to Jarace Walker. And I went, ooh, ding, ding, that's interesting. And I said before the season, a big reason Jarace Walker is going to play more this year is because he's the 11th guy, like pretty much regardless of who's injured. Right? If a 4 is hurt, Obi Toppin is out, Jarace Walker's in. If Siakam's hurt, Jarace Walker can sub in. If a 3 is hurt, Jarace Walker can play the 3. If a 2 is hurt, they'll just slide Nesmith and Mathurin down, and Jarace Walker can play. If a point guard's hurt and Nembhard comes down, Jarace Walker can play. Maybe the center spot is a little different, but like basically any injury he can sub in. And yet, And for the whole season until yesterday, that has been the case, right? He played, I think, the first 45 games he played in every game. Nesmith came back, and I thought he'd lose minutes. That has happened. Whatever. I don't have a problem with that. But last night was the first time they had an opportunity to, and I get that, like Haliburton was on his bench rotation and Nembhard was in foul trouble and not playing very well. I get that they maybe thought in that instance it needs to be a point guard, and they went to Ray J. Dennis. I'm very surprised still that it wasn't like, let's just try a few minutes with Siakam, Mathurin, Walker and see if that's enough ball handling. Would you have done that? Are you surprised by how this has gone, that he is the 11th guy and hasn't played very much recently? What do you make of this? Am I making it too much of a thing that Ray J. Dennis played for 2 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little surprising. You would say, obviously, you look at just the raw numbers, you would think that that would be an opportunity to give a Walker a bit of minutes, and especially just to keep everybody else fresh. If you've got somebody who's good, that's chomping for an opportunity, you can eat up minutes, especially on a team that's maybe a little bit overmatched. That can also keep everybody else healthier. And of course, you're trying to develop Jarace Walker, and so the long-term development, that might be worth the effort. But the fact of the matter still is, I mean, you've got the starting lineup, and you have Nesmith playing, and he's healthy. I mean, that's one thing when we kind of think about the minutes and the way that that's worked out and the way that they've been able to fold in Walker before. They didn't have Nesmith, and so now that they do, and so with Nesmith and Nembhard obviously taking minutes, Haliburton doing what he's doing, and then you've got Shepherd and Mathurin, and then you've got Obi Toppin that you're folding in a little bit. That is mostly playing ostensible big minutes. But that's just a lot of wings, man. It's just still, I mean, right. Even though you're down a person, it doesn't matter if, you've got the 2 through 4 positions, which can, to a degree, be kind of interchangeable. And then you've got guards that can handle the ball, that can maybe be point guards to a certain degree. But point guards are point guards and centers are centers. And when those guys are out, you need those kind of people to replace those minutes. And so, I mean, it's just still hard. I mean, to be able to find minutes in the rotation. I think that you can make an excellent argument that, Ben Shepherd, love Ben Shepherd. He's playing 29 minutes and put up 4 shots. Maybe that's an opportunity.
That's why he's playing 29 minutes.
Right,
because
right.
He touches the ball 6 times a game.
Clearly, they trust him more, to be able to kind of to handle that. I think that I can see both sides of it. It's like you just got a lot of wings that can play those minutes well right now. And nobody played a crazy amount of minutes. I mean, 29 seems a lot for Shepherd, but that's still not, it's not like he's playing 37 minutes and you're like, what the hell? I mean, you got to play somebody else. That seemed like an opportunity for development, but it's just, they got a lot of good wings. So it's, you could also think that he might pick up minutes at the 4, but again, you've got Obi Toppin that's, been able to handle those as well when Siakam's not in there. So it's just still a tight rotation. If they're going to lose a man and get Walker minutes, it probably need to be one of those wings really to be able to kind of fit him in there. It's not like he's going to go in there and run point, obviously. So, it does say something though, I think, about, clearly they maybe don't have a deep burning desire to get him as many minutes as possible and find any excuse that even with a crowded rotation, being able to get him out on the floor a little bit more. I would agree with the idea that is a good indication that that's clearly not the case at this point in time. And then, what needs to change for that to happen? We don't know yet. It's they clearly are prioritizing the players that they can trust versus, how they perceive Walker. So, it might also be one of those things where, yes, he could come in and take a few minutes in a couple of games, but maybe that's just too hard to fold in while you're focusing on some other things. A lot of different ways to look at it, but I think that it does put a highlighter on the fact that they don't have a top level or top 5 priority is getting Jarace Walker as many minutes as possible and developing him. That's clearly lower down on the priority list. If that wasn't abundantly obvious, I think that became very clear with the rotation in the Raptors game.
Exactly. I think that is exactly right. That is what that game in particular revealed, both because of that Ray J. Dennis stretch I'm talking about, and in general, like if Nembhard's having a bad game, he finishes six turnovers, 5 fouls. Like you're playing the Raptors in February. Like you can find minutes for Jarace Walker in that kind of game, you know? That would be the time to actually do it. And they weren't able to or couldn't or whatever their reason was. And so, you know, whether it's not a priority to them or he wasn't a part of the game plan, like Ray J. Dennis was up on his 2-way, whatever the reason is, yeah, it was very clear in that game that it was not what they hoped to do, and they didn't do it. And I think a lot of people would disagree with that, including me. Like I would have probably just tried some other goofy lineup for ball handling reasons at that moment in the game that Ray J. Dennis played, or like you said, tried to squeeze it out of somebody else. You know, they played 9 guys in that game. And it says a lot about what they're trying to do right now, trying to be a top 4 seed. I apparently lost Dave to he has returned to the internet world. So there he is, I think on a phone now, the different lighting. So yeah, they'll try to figure out, I suppose, if they could play him. One injury on an actual wing and they could do it. But alas, that I agree with you 100% that it does reveal their priorities. Well, Dave, your computer probably is dead. So
my computer, you called it. If you were watching this on YouTube and you saw my face just get dim, I didn't just turn to the dark side. I was lowering the light on my laptop in order to try to stretch out the battery as long as possible. And just like me at the beginning of the podcast, it fell asleep.
Oh,
and
that is some storytelling.
It's just amazing how that all came together. You love it when the narrative just finds itself naturally. That's when the best storytelling happens.
Well, that is my sign to let you go, Dave. Where can people find you and your awake thoughts on the Pacers and other happenings of the world, or where you podcast in lieu of playing in the NBA?
Well, if you are lucky, 2 or 3 times a week, you might see me tweet about the Pacers on whatever the Twitter is called now. I am just barely hanging on by a thread of still having a Twitter account, and it's mainly just habit that keeps me there. But you should keep a good eye on it, because that road home split thread I thought was excellent, and about 12 people saw it. But I think that if you had seen it, then you'd feel a little bit better about the Pacers' early struggles and would be ahead of the curve, knowing that they would be kicking butt right now. So that is on Twitter. You can find me there. Also you can also see me in the balcony for many games. And if you see me, then say hi, because I always love it when people do that.
I saw you at a game recently by complete happenstance. That was very enjoyable for me. 2 of your last 10 tweets about Paul George, and 3 of your last 10 tweets include also one of the greatest threads I've ever seen, investigating one of Bismack Biyombo's 3-point attempts, which I also saw independent of your quote tweet. So Dave also only shares good things, which I consider very good for an important Twitter follow. Tomorrow we'll be talking Pacers. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it was also fun running into you at the game, because I was with my nephew, who might be listening. Matthew, if you're listening, how's it going?
Hello, Matthew.
But it was cool that said hi and introduced you, and he kind of had this like, man, Tony East kind of thing. So that was that's always fun.
I do enjoy meeting listeners at games, but it does always strike me as odd that, like, I don't even know what the right word to call it is, but just like people know who I am in the arena. It's just
that's called a humble brag. Actually, that's a very classic humble.
Yeah, brag. But I don't know how to say it without it sounding like a humble brag. But I don't know if I like it.
That's what the humble brag's for, Tony. It's exactly the purpose of the.
I want to meet people who consume the things I say. Right. Yes,
Right.
good. That is good. I don't know why. It just like makes me uncomfortable at times. I'm like, oh, hi, person I don't know. Like in my head, I'm just talking to a computer every day.
Right. Yes. Yes. I know what you mean. And a couple of years ago, I went to a game. It's my sister's first and only Pacers game she's ever been to in her entire life. And we walk into the arena, and as we're walking in, someone says like, "Oh, it's like you're Dave Searle." It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, we loved your podcast and all this sort of stuff." It's like, "Can you take a picture?" And my sister's like, "What the hell is happening?" I think she barely even knew that I did like Pacer stuff, you know? And so she's just like, what? And I was just like, oh, this is perfect. And I was like, oh, yeah, it happens all the time.
That is so funny. That basically exactly happened. I was walking downtown with my mom, and some guy in his car, we were by the Auto Works, leans out his window and goes, Tony East, love your content. And that has never happened to me before. And I'm like, now my mom thinks like a star on the internet. I'm like, I swear, Mom, that has never happened before.
Did he say he loves your content? Is that a slang? What does that mean? What are you doing?
Yeah, and he did not say Pacers content, so that could have been
content.
That could have been anything. Oh, it's exactly the same. All right, Dave. Thank you very much for your. I always go along with you. I'm sorry, it's bad. Although I have to.
It's a compliment. I appreciate it. You're always trying to keep it like a tight 20, and then I goad you into doing these like crazy long podcasts. And
close to 30 is my goal, but I can't do it with you. You and John and Ethan, I just can't. Although I do have to cut out 16 seconds of us just staring at each other while StreamYard decided to lag in the middle.
I couldn't tell him. Tony's computer glitched a little bit, so we had to have a pause. But I kind of thought that you were waiting for me to say something, and I didn't have anything to say.
No, I cut out.
We were doing a standoff.
This is the inside baseball that no one cares about. Everybody, I'll be back tomorrow talking Pacers, Heat, and potentially looking a little bit at the buyout market because it's about to be March, and the Pacers have a roster spot because they didn't keep Jahlil Okafor. So we'll dive into that. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Check out Dave and the things he has to say. We'll see you very soon.